So without further ado, I welcome Professor Sir Jim McDonald to the screen. Sir Jim was the creator of ETP, has been at its helm for the last 11 years now, is also the principal of the University of Strathclyde and is the UK's principal engineer as the president of the Royal Academy of Engineering. So Sir Jim, welcome to the stage.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Stephen, Mark, and good morning, colleagues. It's great that you're joining us for the start of this two-day event. We'll have the various breakout sessions where I think a lot of the deep detail, the exchanges and collaboration will help. I would like to open my comments by giving a particularly very warm welcome to Dr. Adel El Gamal. And Adel is the Secretary General for the European Energy Research Alliance, or ERA, and it's terrific that he's made time to join us this morning. The whole driving underpinning of research and innovation is collaboration, and I think the fact that Adel is here to share his views on energy policy, and technology in particular, is enormously heartening. I always like to take the opportunity at these events to do a very short history of the ETP before I do some reflections on the direction of travel for ETP, but in the context of national and international policy imperatives. As Stephen Mark has said, the ETP has been an entity for about 11 years. For those of you that don't know the Scottish research system terribly well, about 15 years ago, the Scottish Government's research funding agency, the Scottish Funding Council, created a group of what was called research pools. And this is basically consortia of Scottish universities, not with a myopic view just in Scotland, but a consortium of Scottish universities that connects to the national and international community. And the ETP is one of those research pools. 13 academic partners, as you've seen, and in reflection of our 10th anniversary last year, we made some significant changes to the governance of the ETP by restructuring the board. Every one of our university core partners is represented in the board, and we've been looking at, and I'll comment in a moment, about reframing some of the key energy thematic groups that we've been working on. But as well as the core function of a research pool being to underpin, support and facilitate collaboration between these research partners, the ETP operates very effectively at the nexus between academic research, industrial engagement and innovation, and the policy community. And that's a very fruitful area to be. In fact, very few of these things can exist without the other. And ETP has found itself naturally in the space between how we inform and influence government policy around energy, also respond to the requirement for information and evidence to help our colleagues in Scottish Government and beyond, and certainly the Scottish Government agencies, think about how energy can be a key thematic for the nation, but also how we can build international opportunity, economic growth, as well as doing the right thing in terms of making a positive impact on climate change. But the bringing together of the industry partners has been critically important. In many ways, ETB has been an early exemplar of how pooling can engage with industry very well. But the two flagship programs that many of you will be aware of, it sits in our doctorate program and our knowledge exchange network program. The doctorate program is an absolute joy for me to participate in. We're now approaching 130 PhD studentships and awards that will have been made since ETP was established. Already 90 of those PhD students have graduated, the majority of which have now gone into energy innovation roles, either in industry or continuing their research activities. And the total funding for that is in excess of £10 million already. So a very significant investment, and very importantly, almost 40% of that funding has come from our business and industry partners. So that tells us the ETP is catalysing that connectivity between government funding, excellent academic capability within the 13 research partners, and the support, as it were, from our government partners. So absolutely essential, and we've already started our discussion with our colleagues in Scottish Government to look to extend that programme and we have a medium-term plan to ultimately bring this up to somewhere around 200 PhD students in the ETP through the next 5 years or so. The Knowledge Exchange Network is another great example of how we take excellent research capability, map it through collaborative research to having an impact. And the Knowledge Exchange Network is a way of us engaging with particularly the small to medium enterprise community, not exclusively, but certainly all of those, in order to translate knowledge that's been built up from our university partners out into supporting innovative SMEs, as well as other supply chain partners, and as appropriate, some of the bigger OEMs and tier 1 partners in there. So KEN, as it's called, the Knowledge Exchange Network, is now in its 10th year of operation, and it functions across 7 themes. Again, another example of why the ETP has done well is that we put collaboration and the delivery of value to our partners at the front of everything that we do. So, for example, we work very close in that front with Scottish Government and its agencies, Scottish Enterprise and Highlands and Islands Enterprise. But very importantly, we co-invest in the business development managers. So the professionals that work between academia and business, they are the active agents, as it were, to translate the research value into industrial innovation and value. And we have co-investing partners from Wave Energy Scotland, from the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult, from the Energy Systems Catapult, Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, and we've just in the past couple of weeks concluded a new partnership arrangement with Transport Scotland, and we are now seeking across the ETP partnership to find a champion for Transport Scotland, as we will be investing in a new transport business development manager that will be connected within the Knowledge Exchange Network. So that's extremely important. And each project involves at least one small to medium enterprise and one researcher. And typically, the 18 projects that are currently in the portfolio are leveraging something like £130,000 or so of industrial investment in innovation R&D. So all up, you can see the spread of ETP activities fundamentally connected to the research base, looking at, as it were, low TRL activities where we have curiosity-driven research. Also, very importantly, of the research that's important to industry partners being used to translate economic growth, as well as collaborative activity in dealing with the climate change challenge. So coming back to research, we currently have 11 thematic groupings, and you won't be surprised by them, but I think the fact that we can drive these programs demonstrates the diversity and quality of the research base in Scotland. We have work underway in bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, energy conversion and storage, energy distribution and infrastructure, including grid, of course, energy efficiency in buildings, energy policy, people and society. That one was very important, that we brought explicitly the policy community to work with the ETP, working in heat energy, marine energy, solar PV, and wind energy, and oil and gas. And the latter is an important aspect because we should be working with and supporting our colleagues in the oil and gas industry as they now move at pace, and it will require pace in the energy transition to drive towards a low carbon future. And I'll touch on that in a moment. You've heard from Steve and Mark that this is the 11th ETP annual conference because fundamentally, colleagues, the ETP is all about the researchers, PhD students, early career researchers, as well as the experienced academics working in partnership with industry. But conferences like this bring us together to share what we've been doing and also to help us plan in the board the other things we should be thinking about as we go forward. Through the course of the next couple of days, we'll have almost 50 presentations from ETP doctorate students and early career researchers from around the world, and a very warm welcome to those colleagues that will be joining us from outside the immediate Scottish pooling area. There are colleagues from Northern Ireland, from England, Belgium, Canada and the United States. So that's wonderful, and over the course of the next couple of days, we'll have over 100 participants in 9 theme sessions. So ETP, we were very relevant, of course, when we began the journey some 11 or so years ago, but as we know, and Adele, I'm sure, will also comment, the international awakening to the explicit need for us to take a coherent and focused and swifter response to dealing with climate change has never been more important. And we think about the backdrop, you know, the various agreements to Kyoto, Copenhagen. I'm delighted to say in my own home city of Glasgow, at this time next year, we'll be hosting COP26. And the level of expectation that is building around COP26 is very significant. We have to work together with the international community to make sure that is a success. But driving this coordinated, collaborative international effort is extremely important. If I think about UK for a moment, the UK is probably one of the largest countries that's made internationally a legally binding commitment to arrive at net zero by 2050. The Scottish Government have put an even more challenging target in there at 2045. Underneath that, there are layered activities with decarbonising transport, for example. And my own city of Glasgow has made a very significant and bold commitment to create a zero carbon opportunity in Glasgow by 2030. So we're seeing the public sector, be it local government in cities, local government regionally, devolved government here in Scotland, within the UK and beyond that into the national community. It seems to me, and I hope with all my heart, that we've gone through a tipping point where the nice to do that may have been 12, 15 years ago is a must do. And that's making sure the policy vectors are lined up, creating the right investment conditions where we can invest in new infrastructure, new technologies, new opportunities in terms of research, education and jobs. But we must do this. And the net zero targets that we've talked about are exactly where the ETP can make its contribution across these various areas I've talked about, whether it's in renewables, decarbonising transport, end use, as well as policy and economics. So this converged opportunity is critically important. And ETP, whilst internationally we may look modest in scale, as I already have said to you, 13 universities, 130 PhD students, an ambition to grow that further again, the knowledge exchange network. I would like to think, and this is true for Scotland generally, we may be a small country, but I think we can have a disproportionate impact internationally. And that's exactly what the ETP is about. And if we think about the future, two aspects I will talk about briefly. You've heard from Stephen Mark that I have the privilege of being president of the Royal Academy of Engineering. The Royal Academy has found itself in an increasingly sought after role from the UK government in terms of providing policy advice. And around this, I sit on the Prime Minister's Council for Science and Technology as President of the Royal Academy of Engineering. And in January this year, CST, as it's called, submitted a letter and a report to our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, on how we might take the pathway to 2050 to achieve net zero. I commend to you, colleagues, if you can Google BEIS, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and look for the CST report, and you'll find a multiple set of recommendations around investment, behaviours, skills, innovation, the need to create new low carbon infrastructure and doing it at pace. So please have a look at that. And through that, the Royal Academy of Engineering continues its work to try and form what we call whole energy systems thinking. So I'm an engineer and I adopt a systems engineering approach to most of the problem solving that I do. And the Royal Academy of Engineering is proposing this structured, rigorous and disciplined approach to identifying what investments have to be made in order to get us to net zero. And as many of you know, I know there are many engineers on the call, understanding interdependencies, understanding an overarching system design component where we understand what we're trying to achieve, recognizing where constraints are, and then applying engineering, innovation and design to come up with solutions and then build out on that layer by layer. Something, again, that is very natural for engineers to take. And increasingly now, it's heartening for me to say the UK government is adopting that approach. And in fact, the Royal Academy of Engineering is providing direct support and training for many of our colleagues in the UK government to take that systems approach to decomposition of the problem space and then identifying key solutions and then moving at pace. And again, emphasising me as an engineer, there is no perfect solution. What is key is we need to get moving. So this 80-20 rule, as we like, let's get moving in that journey of identifying and investing in a key systems architecture over the next 10 years plus on our journey to 2050. In a similar vein, I would commend to you the Energy Systems Catapult report that was published earlier this year, responding to the UK government's Committee on Climate Change, which set out the vision for 2050. It didn't have the technical backdrop behind it, of course, but it was setting out the vision for 2050 for net zero. We've seen this move to drive forward the activities, and the Energy Systems Catapult did an excellent piece of scenario planning, and based on a whole range of options. The broad headlines are that in order to decarbonise the energy system, no surprise that there'll need to be an energy transition for the oil and gas industry, and we're seeing many of the senior executives in the oil and gas industry committing to that journey. Bernard Loney, the CEO of BP, recently has talked about this critical need for leadership in the industry. And of course, there are opportunities there in oil and gas, whether we go from blue hydrogen, for example, reforming hydrogen from the hydrocarbons that are recovered from oil and gas, all the way through to carbon capture and storage and utilisation, where the oil and gas industry can play a leadership role, both in terms of technological innovation, investment capability, and indeed project management and delivery capability. But the renewable energy revolution that we've seen over recent decades is now really gathering momentum. The Scottish Government, I think, have done a fantastic job committing and recommitting to this renewable journey for Scotland. The UK Prime Minister just about 3 weeks ago talked about by 2030 having all of our domestic energy supplied by offshore renewables. That will mean something like a quadrupling of the offshore wind deployments that we currently have. Major engineering challenge. There's still a need for greater innovation around the turbines themselves, the grid interconnectivity, moving to floating wind, understanding the systems control and design aspects of it, but also looking at major investment in grid infrastructure. And the grid that we'll need for the 21st century is likely to be somewhat different in shape, scale and design from that which we've benefited from over the past 100 years. But that's going to need new technologies, new designs, new standards, and new investment strategies if we're going to decarbonise. And of course, the increased use of hydrogen is now anticipated within those whole energy systems. So the Energy Systems Catapult imagined by 2050, we might have predominantly a mix of nuclear, biomass, CCS and other renewables. And as far as we possibly can, having negative emissions technologies too, to compensate for or mitigate for the industry emissions. Aviation, which of course is having a challenge just now because of COVID-19 and the impacts of livestock. So an opportunity to invert how we imagine large energy systems by being much more decentralised, certainly decarbonised and digitalised, as we can automate and use the benefit of pervasive communications and control technologies to bring a degree of flexibility in how we generate, manage, distribute, and then utilise energy. But this is going to require societal change as well. Of course, it's about technology. Of course, it's about policy and investment. But we as citizens have to take that responsibility. And I have to say, as a father of 3 children, all of whom are engineers, by the way, professional engineers, they are much more socially progressive than my generation was at that stage. And I think the tipping point is also that there is an expectation that society moves towards this decarbonised future. We can see this through the impacts of Greta Thunberg, who's been iconic in terms of catalysing the youth towards this future. And we'll see, I believe, the political community moving in that direction as well. If we, again, imagine the UK 2050 net zero strategy, lots of interesting possibilities for us. Direct air capture of CO2 from air, through ambient air and chemical processing. Hydrogen, either through steam reforming of methane with carbon capture and storage, or biomass gasification with CCS, all the way through to electrolysis to capture hydrogen. But in terms of electricity supply, if we are going to electrify transport, if we are going to electrify heating, we may have to double the heat, double the electricity supply in order to meet that demand. So it comes with it very, very big challenges infrastructurally, and we may have to treble the current capacity of electricity, which is no mean feat, given that we have lots of aging plant in the UK, if we are going to include this hydrogen production as well. So lots to be done. It's a wonderful challenge for engineers and technologists. It's a key challenge for those in the policy community. ETP sits squarely in that exciting space where we can bring forward ideas through our PhD programs, through our knowledge exchange network, to translate what we know into the SME base. And all of you, our researchers, our senior academics, our partners from the public agencies, and last but not least, our industrial partners. I think ETP has done a fantastic job over the past decade, and I am absolutely convinced that we'll be playing a critical role both in Scotland and the UK and beyond over the next decade. ETP is well recognised. That's because of the great work from Stephen Mark and his team, and to him my credit. And we should say, because of the impacts of COVID-19, here we are using this environment to connect, because I think in the coming years, as we look over our shoulder, as we hopefully get a vaccine, we get the world prepared for and protected from the virus, we'll see that COVID-19 has been a big accelerator for digital transformation, and potentially a big accelerator to achieve net zero because of what we're experiencing. So with that, it's great to have you on the call. I'm sure the next 2 days are going to be really exciting, and I will now pass back to Stephen Mark. Thank you very much.